Hey, you guys. It's me again. My daughter just woke up from a nap, so she's confused at what I'm doing. She just woke up from a nap, so hopefully she'll sit with me and we can do this video. Sorry, the lighting is super weird. Um, but anyway, yeah, she's gonna be hanging out with us this time. Hopefully she does okay. Her first lesson in U.S. history. Um, so I'm gonna do just a real quick lecture for the New Deal, which was kind of like the FDR, the next president, his answer for the Great Depression. So hopefully it should just take a couple, I don't know, maybe like 15 minutes or so, and then you'll see the instructions um, for the what's it called? for the poster requirements. Sorry, I got distracted. But yeah, that's the plan. So let's switch over to this side. Okay, let's just present this. So, the New Deal. You guys can see the Fireside Chats. This is one of your IDs. From the last unit that we did, or the last lecture we did, the bonus army was an ID, but I forgot to let you guys know that. So let's get into it. Do you guys remember how I talked to you about how Herbert Hoover was the president before, and he pretty much did not do enough to help the Americans. Hold on, I might have to pause because Danny's mad. Hold on. Someone's happy again. She has a snack. So everything is okay. She's so confused at what I'm doing right now. Okay, so let's get back into it. Switch back over. Okay, so yeah, I told you guys that Herbert Hoover did not do enough to help Americans, and they were really upset. Obviously, the bonus army I told you was like the last straw, kind of like what they were really upset about. President FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, he runs against Herbert Hoover in the next election, and he wins in a landslide because Americans wanted change. He promised a lot of help, and he gave it to them. He won the presidency, but he made his whole plan, because you guys know that the election is in November, and then the president isn't inaugurated until January. When FDR became president, presidents weren't inaugurated until April. So that means that they had about 5 months of like sitting around planning, I guess, for their like years in office. It's called the lame duck period because technically you don't have power. But what FDR did during his lame duck period was he organized his plan, and he created a plan called the New Deal, which was literally like, I'm giving Americans a new deal. He had 15 major pieces of legislation, and pretty much all those pieces of legislation expanded the role of the federal government. So before, I told you guys it was like rugged individualism, the government shouldn't have to help you out. Now it's opposite of that. It's like the government will spend as much money as it takes to help the American people out. And obviously there's going to be critics of it, but that was his plan. It kind of like falls under three categories, the three R's. You'll need this when you're doing your poster later. But relief, recovery, and reform. Okay, those are the three R's of the New Deal. So relief, think about it this way, who needed relief? It was the needy, right? That needed relief. So the people that were struggling, they needed relief. What needed to recover? The economy obviously needed to recover. And then what needed to change? What needed to reform? Well, obviously the financial institutions needed to reform. So like banks and the stock market and stuff like that. So speaking of reform, the first thing that FDR did when he came into office as a part of his New Deal is he passed the Emergency Banking Relief Act in 1933. And what this was is, you guys remember the run on the banks that I talked to you about in the last lecture? Americans or banks had to close down, right? And so Americans didn't trust banks. They had lost their life savings. So what FDR did is he said all the banks were going on a holiday, and he closed and inspected every single bank in America. And you could not reopen until you could prove that you were sound, meaning that you could pay back debts that were owed. And I'm not saying everybody recovered their money, but um, but because if a bank shut down, then that was it, like during the run on the banks. But these are banks that still were managing to stay afloat. They had to close their doors, prove they could pay their debts, and then they could open back up. He also passed the FDIC, which we'll read a little bit more about later. The FDIC is the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. It literally is like an insurance for your deposit. And so this is something that we still have today. Now it's more than $5,000, but it pretty much said that if you have insurance of up to $5,000, so if you put $5,000 in the bank and the bank crashes, the government is guaranteeing you that you'll get that $5,000 back. If you have 7,000 in there, well, they're guaranteeing you that you'll get 5,000 back. What this did is people just felt more confident, and because really banks work if people put their money in it, and also banks were more cautious. Remember, they put a ton of money in the stock market, and that crashed, and that didn't work out so well. So banks were more cautious, people were more confident. The second thing that he did was he passed the Agricultural Adjustment Act. If you guys remember, farm industries were really struggling, obviously, because of the Dust Bowl and just overproduction. So the Agricultural Adjustment Act, the government actually paid farmers to plant less crops. So literally, it was like the government was paying you to promise that you wouldn't plant as much. The goal of doing that is to just like release, or sorry, not release, but reduce the amount of crops that are available, which means you can raise the price, if that makes sense. So it just like gets rid of a surplus, creates more demand, so farmers could raise the prices, and then that in turn tried to help kind of solve the issues of the overproduction and the price dropping of all the farm products. The next one, this is also part of his first New Deal program, was the Civilian Conservation Corps, which was passed in 1933. This offered employment to over 3 million young men. Notice how I say men. The vast majority of the New Deal programs impacted men. So that was the focus. They said, well, men should be the priority in getting jobs because they're the ones that are supposed to be the breadwinners, supposed to be providing for their families. Many of these men left their wives and children alone. You guys probably noticed that in some of the images of the New Deal. They left their children alone and their wives alone, which was really hard. Women kind of had to watch their children starve while their men went off to these different programs trying to find work. So Civilian Conservation Corps was really focused on like working in parks, planting trees, making trails, bridges, campgrounds. You guys know some of those parks you go to where there's like built-in like workout kind of stations. That was like the type of thing that they would do, planting trees, creating trails, etc. You guys might even be able to see signs, either Civilian Conservation Corps or the Works Progress Administration. They both did kind of similar things. And then I bet you every single one of you guys have heard of the Social Security Administration. Social Security Administration was passed in 1935. This is FDR's longest lasting act. A lot of the other ones were kind of cut short. It was too much money for the government. It only lasted for a little bit. Some were declared unconstitutional, but this one still exists today. You guys actually probably all have a Social Security card. This Social Security card that you have, when you're born, you get it if you're living in the United States. And do you have your social security number? Yeah, you can go find Dada. She's finished her snack. That is the current update. And she's over the lecture. But old age benefits for retired workers, and then benefits for victims of work accidents, unemployment insurance, aid for handicap, just a lot of the things that exist today. Like if you go on unemployment, that's because of the Social Security Administration. If you retire and you're still getting paid, that's because of the Social Security Administration. So just kind of like helping out Americans that were in need was a really big focus of the Social Security Administration. And then kind of like a really like important sort of essential idea to all of this was FDR and his Fireside Chats. So I want you guys to look at this picture. You guys can see FDR sitting here. He's sitting in his wheelchair. He had polio, so, but whatever, you can't really tell anyway. He always wanted to make that very clear, but you see him sitting here in front of like CBS, NBC, all the radio stations. You guys know this is a picture everybody would tune in to listen to the radio. So what FDR did is he would get on weekly and he would talk to the American people. He would explain New Deal programs. Some of them were kind of complicated, and so he would explain the programs, say this is where you can go to sign up, this is how much you'll get paid, this is who we're looking for, these are jobs that you could do. He also talked to them about this. He like answered any of their questions. So people would call in to the radio shows, to the Fireside Chats. People would call in and ask him questions, and he would then respond to Americans' questions. And so he would say, you know, this person from Long Island, New York was wondering about, you know, how do I know if I should put my money back into the stock market? And he would talk to them about buying stocks, and he would talk to them about like the banking measures that he was taking to kind of like make sure banks were safe so people wouldn't just lose their money. He spoke in such a clear, simple language. It wasn't like all politician-y. It wasn't like, he was just like very clear and direct, and it was informal, and it seemed to the people like the president was talking directly to them. And so the Fireside Chats went a really long way in helping the economy, in restoring Americans' faith in the government, in restoring their faith in banks, in the stock market, in knowing where to go to get jobs. It was absolutely instrumental to his New Deal program. Without the Fireside Chats, you probably wouldn't have had as much success in those New Deal programs. But obviously, there's always going to be critics. There was the people on the left that said, you're not doing enough. It's not the New Deal. It's a raw deal, right? We didn't actually get a good deal out of this. There's still Americans suffering. On the other side, on the right, you had people said that this is way too much, saying that the government is stepping in way too much. It's interfering way too much. Capitalists believe in like a laissez-faire, hands-off government, and critics of the New Deal on the right said that this is opposite of that. They accused FDR of being socialist, and you know, not like looking out for American ideals. So there were critics. You guys next week are going to look at some documents to see like, was the New Deal successful? But for right now, I just want you guys to focus on this little assignment that I'm going to have you guys do. If you look on, let's see. If you guys look on Canvas, this is actually the assignment right here, the New Deal poster. Go to this link to look at the programs, read through, choose one of the 5 programs, and then you guys are going to make a little poster. Just upload the picture for me. Just any blank piece of paper is fine. And just, yeah, choose one of the programs. There are so many programs. I'm only having you look at 5 of them and just choose the one that stands out the most to you. And that is it. Hope you guys are having a good week and staying safe.